Well, howdy, and welcome back to another Men's Daily Bible Study. We're in Genesis 6 today. So let's jump in. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and bird of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God, and Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and outside with pitch. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with them. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds after their kind, of animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind, 2 of every kind will come with you to keep them alive. And you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. Thus Noah did according to all that God commanded, so he did. So Genesis 6 is very interesting. So we have this, and we have this event where these called here the sons of God, that take wives from the daughters of men, and it says that, well, this is where giants came from. These sons of God procreate with human women, and the result are these giants, these men of renown, or these Nephilim. Very interesting passage here. The result of these events is great wickedness on the earth. Now there's smatterings of little pieces to this story throughout Scripture. It doesn't really, now the Bible doesn't really go into detail about these events or these entities called the sons of God here. But from other Scripture, we can deduce that these are angelic beings who came to earth in rebellion and began to produce their own bloodline on the earth. And there's a lot of different theories and kind of a little bit of speculation about why that is, but I think a good one has to do with their attempt to subvert the dominion of man that God gave Adam and his offspring on the earth. So they rebelled, these sons of God, these angelic beings rebelled against God, and just as the serpent in the garden, they have this plan and means to subvert the order that God has put into place, where he gave Adam dominion. After the fall of Adam, his dominion was not taken away. He was kicked out of the garden, but he was still put in charge of the earth. And so these events unfold. And we see, and so it says, in these days there were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. So this was before the flood and after the flood. So there's some different theories behind this, but at the very least, this is a recurring event. So they didn't give up. These beings did not just kind of give up after the flood. Either they recreated the same event, basically, and there's some theories that maybe some of these giants survived the flood, which I don't see that really holds up, since it says here that God's going to destroy every living thing on earth. So, but either way, this event appears to happen again after the flood, and this is just directly in line with Satan's continued war against God, and it's really not surprising. So it's pretty popular these days to talk about the Book of Enoch and First Enoch in specific, and it appears to fill in a lot of this story, and I think that can be useful. It's interesting because these things are mentioned without much detail, almost as if this is common knowledge and people would have known. And we see this also in Second Temple Judaism, that sort of the traditions and histories that they have, or they had. And so it appears that this is sort of common knowledge. There's early church, I think Justin Martyr, have his writings right over here. I think I should pull it up here. This, I can find it really quick here. Interesting. Yeah, here we go. These are the writings of Justin Martyr. He's a very early church father. And this is in his writing. He says, "But if this idea take possession of someone, that if we acknowledge God as our helper, we should not say, as we say, be oppressed and persecuted by the wicked, this too I will solve. God, when he made the whole world and subjected things earthly to man, and arranged the heavenly elements for the increase of fruits and rotation of the seasons, and appointed this divine law, for these things also he evidently made for man, committed to the care of men and of all things under heaven to angels whom he appointed over them." Guys, this would line up with like the Watchers, and we see in Scripture where there does appear to be angelic beings who have like a position of caretaking or like authority over regions of the earth. One example of this was that I think it was Michael the Archangel was delayed by what's called the Prince of Persia in one of these accounts in Scripture. And so you've got this entity, this angelic entity who has sort of dominion over this area of the earth, or a position of authority of some kind. And he's not on the good side, right? And he's opposing God's angel. So that's interesting. So then Justin Martyr continues, he says, "But the angels transgressed this appointment and were captivated by the love of women and begot children who are those that are called demons. And besides, they afterwards subdued the human race to themselves, partly by magical writings and partly by fears and the punishments they occasioned, and partly by teaching them to offer sacrifices and incense and libations, of which things they stood in need, after they were enslaved by lustful passions, and among men they sowed murders, wars, adulteries, intemperate deeds, and all wickedness. Whence also the poets and mythologists, not knowing that it was the angels and those demons who had begotten by them that did these things to men and women in cities and nations, which they related, ascribed them to God himself, and to those who were accounted to be his very offspring, and to the offspring of those who were called his brothers, Neptune and Pluto, and to the angels again of their offsprings. For whatever name each of the angels had given to himself and his children, by that name they called them." So this is the understanding of the very early church, Justin Martyr here. And this stuff lines up with scripture, and it also lines up with extra biblical sources like First Enoch. And so this fits with the narrative. You see this great proliferation of evil on the earth directly following these events of these sons of God, as they're called here, coming to earth and having a Nephilim or giant offspring with human women, and then, as Justin Martyr points out, basically teaching mankind how to be evil and how to rebel against God. And so this is the result, and so God has to deal with that situation. So very interesting. And then he, like Justin Martyr says, these are the offspring of these angels, angelic beings, and the human women are what we call demons. And these are the unclean spirits that we see Christ addressing and dealing with in the New Testament. So these disembodied spirits of these giants, they're half angelic and half human, kind of a weird situation. They don't fall into either category fully, and so they're just kind of hanging out here until the final judgment, basically, and wreaking havoc and this kind of thing. And so we see this in the New Testament also. So another example, we could go over here to Jude. And find it real quick here. Okay. It's a very short book. We should be able to find this here quickly. Oh yeah, okay, so where we are. Jude says in verse 5, "But I want to remind you that though you once knew this, that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day." So these angels, they had a place that God gave them caretaking sort of positions, and they rebelled against that and chose to come to earth and begin creating their own bloodline, I think, to try to take dominion in the place of mankind. And Jude also references Enoch. He says, "Now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about these men also, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have committed in an ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." But there's multiple places in Scripture where we see this, the results of these Genesis 6 events kind of pop up, and they're not explained in detail in Scripture, but you can kind of put together a picture of what's going on. And the reason that the Bible doesn't give us sort of a whole layout of what this all is because that's not really the purpose of Scripture. The purpose of Scripture, very specifically, is about Jesus. It's about God revealing his redemptive work, his redemptive plan throughout history to ultimately right what was wronged and destroyed in the fall of Adam when sin entered the world. And that is the purpose and the narrative line for Scripture. And so there is many things that the Bible doesn't talk about because it's not that's not what it's for. But anyway, I think it's interesting to note this because, like Scripture says, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and the rulers of this dark age. And so these angelic beings who had a position of authority and rebelled, they're still there and they still have the same agenda. And I think, a lot of Christians, we don't think much about that aspect of reality, and it can be very sort of a narrow view. Like there's like angels, good angels, and then there's demons, and that's kind of it. But in Scripture, there's more to it than that. It's more three-dimensional than that. So anyway, very interesting stuff in Genesis 6, and and so God tells Noah to build an ark. Noah walked with God. Noah is faithful to God, and it's through him that God continues the human race instead of just completely starting over or ending the whole thing. And so there are people obviously who had walked with God prior to this, and then of course Noah specifically going forward. So in the next chapter, the flood, this is God dealing with the great proliferation of evil on the earth following these events of these rebellious angels, these watchers, what have you, as they propagated a lot more evil on the earth than what would have otherwise happened. And just having read from Justin Martyr's understanding of it, very early church father, they kind of understood these spiritual realm things a little more back then. Modern Christianity has, I think, unfortunately, taken too much of a cue from our materialistic secular culture, where just everything that we see is the extent of reality, and that's just not true. So very interesting stuff. So what do we got here? We got people with comments here. Wayne doesn't believe Scripture or the evidence for God. Well, that's a whole discussion, but creation alone is evidence for God. Everything that is made, everything that is created has to have a creator. So that's just the basic bare bones start of it. he says, who was more honest to Adam and Eve in the garden, God or the devil? God. Adam, or the serpent, completely lied to Eve in the garden. So yeah, there we go. Good stuff. All right. Anybody have any other comments before we sign off here? And if not, we'll just finish this video up and come back on the next one as we continue through Genesis. Wayne Schultz also says, for the Bible tells me so is not sufficient convincing evidence. Well, if you're looking for extra biblical evidence, there is actually on a yearly basis, the more archaeological evidence that is uncovered, the more proof, if you want to call it that, but the more support for the biblical narrative we find. Whether that's specifically events recorded in the New Testament, but also in the Old Testament. And there's nothing archaeologically that contradicts Scripture. And it's just a continual, it's a fact that it just continues to support the biblical narrative. So there's that. And then just simply the fact that the Scripture, this is like the New Testament specifically, that is an historical account, and it has withstood the test of time and scrutiny for the last over 2,000 years, and I'm speaking specifically of the New Testament, but also the Old Testament, and that's also supported with archaeological evidence and manuscript evidence, and the manuscript evidence for the New Testament is overwhelming compared to any other ancient or any other ancient writings, and that's just a fact. So anyways, go ahead and sign off here. Appreciate you guys watching. We will see you on the next Men's Daily Bible Study. Take care.